For decades, the glitz and glamour of vintage Hollywood have been preserved in the amber of syndication. But occasionally, the modern digital landscape distorts that history through the lens of sensationalism. In early 2022, a viral online advertising campaign began circulating across various digital platforms, capturing the fleeting attention of millions with a staggering and deeply emotional claim. The headline boldly proclaimed that a beloved star from the legendary television sitcom Gilligan's Island was rapidly approaching the incredible milestone of 103 years old while living an unconventional, highly secretive lifestyle. This carefully calculated wording was explicitly engineered to exploit the deep-seated nostalgia, curiosity, and protective affection that multiple generations of television viewers still hold for the iconic castaways. Within mere hours of its initial appearance, social media feeds, classic television forums, and comment sections across the internet were flooded with a single highly anticipated name, Tina Louise. Given that the broader public was fully aware of the tragic passing of her former castmates over the years, it seemed entirely logical and highly plausible that this shocking piece of news was referring directly to her. Millions of clicks ensued, driven by a collective desire to witness a living miracle, yet the reality behind the curtain was far more manipulative than a simple celebration of advanced longevity. The deceptive nature of modern internet advertising relies heavily on the strategic blurring of historical facts to generate revenue, a tactic perfectly exemplified by this specific viral phenomenon. As eager readers clicked through a seemingly endless ad-laden online slideshow designed to maximize page views, the true subject of the headline was intentionally withheld until the very final pages. The individual who was actually nearing his 103rd birthday was not the glamorous actress who played Ginger Grant, but rather Nehemiah Persoff, a brilliantly accomplished and highly respected character actor. Persoff had indeed appeared on Gilligan's Island, but his involvement was limited to a singular guest-starring role in a memorable Season 2 episode titled The Little Dictator, where he played an exiled leader. At the time the advertisement first began circulating, Persoff was indeed alive and celebrating his remarkable centenarian status, making the headline technically accurate according to the literal definitions of journalism. However, the emotional mechanics of the ad were undeniably predatory, deliberately banking on the assumption that audiences would immediately associate the show's name with one of the core castaways who spent years stranded on the fictional uncharted tropical island. This specific advertising strategy exposes a broader trend in the digital attention economy, where the rich history of classic television is routinely weaponized to create profitable clickbait. By using the immediately recognizable branding of a beloved mid-century sitcom, the creators of the advertisement successfully bypassed the audience's skepticism, knowing that nostalgia often overrides critical analysis. Nehemiah Persoff was undoubtedly a titan of the acting industry, with a sprawling career that spanned decades of dramatic theater, film, and television excellence far beyond his brief comedic stint on CBS. Yet the advertisement completely flattened his extensive professional legacy, reducing his entire life's work to a singular guest appearance just to create a misleading connection to a more famous franchise. This calculated omission of context created a false narrative framework that effectively manipulated the public's genuine emotional investment in the surviving culture of 1960s television history. Meanwhile, the actual last surviving member of the core cast, Tina Louise, was living quietly in New York City, completely disconnected from the sensationalized claims of the internet. At the time, she was navigating her early 90s with grace, far from the 103-year-old figure promised by the predatory digital campaign that bore her name in the forums. The persistent confusion surrounding this viral hoax highlights the unique, almost frozen-in-time relationship that the global public maintains with the actors who portrayed the legendary castaways. Born Tina Blacker in New York City back in 1934, the elegant actress has found herself in the poignant and often isolating position of having outlived every single one of her primary sitcom co-stars. The gradual dismantling of the original ensemble began decades ago, with each subsequent loss marking the somber conclusion of a distinct chapter in American entertainment history. The beloved and iconic Bob Denver, who captured the hearts of millions as the clumsy but well-meaning Gilligan, passed away following severe medical complications from major cancer surgery. Alan Hale Jr., the booming and endlessly charismatic skipper, succumbed to a lengthy battle with cancer years prior, leaving a massive void in the community of classic Hollywood survivors. Jim Backus, who delivered an unforgettable comedic performance as the eccentric billionaire Thurston Howell III, eventually lost his lengthy, physically debilitating battle with the ravages of Parkinson's disease. These initial losses forced the surviving cast members to confront the reality that their collective legacy was transitioning from active television history into the realm of permanent cultural myth. As the years marched forward into the 21st century, the remaining members of the tight-knit television family continued to pass away, further narrowing the circle of living connections to the island. Natalie Schafer, who played the delightfully refined Lovey Howell, lived a long and full life before her passing, followed eventually by the brilliantly intellectual Russell Johnson, known to millions as the Professor. The sense of collective grief reached a profound peak in late 2020 when Dawn Wells, the sweet and perpetually vibrant actress who portrayed Mary Ann Summers, passed away from COVID-19 complications. With her death, the ultimate realization set in across the entertainment landscape. Tina Louise was now officially the absolute final survivor of the SS Minnow's historic voyage. This stark demographic reality is precisely why the misleading 2022 advertisement gained such immediate and aggressive traction among classic television fans worldwide. The public has developed a deeply ingrained psychological reflex to protect and monitor the well-being of the last remaining guardian of their childhood television memories. Therefore, when a headline vaguely hinted at extreme longevity and mysterious living conditions, it tapped into a profound, collective desire to believe that the magic of the island was somehow immortal. To understand why the public remains so intensely fixated on the survival and age of Tina Louise, one must examine the extraordinary, unprecedented phenomenon of Gilligan's Island in syndication history. The show was originally broadcast on the CBS network for a relatively brief three-season run between 1964 and 1967, producing a total of 98 highly memorable episodes. Under normal industry circumstances of the era, a show with such a short lifespan might have quietly faded into the background of television history, remembered only by dedicated historians. However, the dawn of intense afternoon television syndication during the 1970s and 1980s completely transformed the series from a modest network comedy into a permanent cultural juggernaut. It became an inescapable staple of after-school viewing for millions of children, ensuring that the characters remained actively present in the cultural consciousness for decades. Cable networks later picked up the mantle, broadcasting the episodes on a continuous loop, which effectively prevented the cast from ever truly aging in the minds of the viewing public. Through this constant, uninterrupted circulation across the airwaves, the seven-stranded castaways became permanently suspended in a state of perpetual youth and vibrant comedic energy. The digital revolution of the 21st century only served to further amplify this strange phenomenon, introducing the black and white and Technicolor episodes to entirely new generations through modern streaming platforms. Young children today can log onto a streaming service and watch Ginger Grant step out of a makeshift bamboo hut in a glamorous, shimmering evening gown, looking radiant and confident. Because of this technological preservation, the human mind struggles to instinctively reconcile the vibrant, 20-something movie star on screen with a real-world woman navigating her 90s. The passage of time is effectively erased by the medium itself, creating a profound psychological disconnect between the fictional character and the living, breathing human actress. When a modern internet headline suddenly introduces the reality of advanced old age into this equation, it shocks the system of the viewer, forcing a confrontation with mortality. The mythic status of the island, where no one ever grew old and every problem was solved in 30 minutes, clashes violently with the uncompromising reality of human aging. This tension is precisely what clickbait creators exploit, transforming the natural process of a woman growing older into a sensationalized, almost supernatural mystery. By the year 2025, more than 6 full decades after the initial pilot episode was filmed, the cultural weight resting upon the shoulders of Tina Louise has grown exponentially heavier. As the final living link to that legendary creative ensemble, her physical presence in the modern world carries a profound historical significance that transcends simple celebrity status. Every public appearance she makes and every rare interview she grants is inevitably viewed through the heavy lens of retrospective memorialization and collective nostalgia. Journalists and fans alike routinely approach her not just as an individual artist with a sprawling career, but as a living museum archive of a bygone era. This constant association means that her personal present is perpetually tethered to the ghosts of her past, transforming her legacy into a complex mixture of celebration and mourning. The persistent public desire to hold on to the familiar, comforting world of mid-century television creates an atmosphere where her actual, everyday life is frequently overshadowed by fantasy. The internet audience does not necessarily want to engage with the quiet reality of an elderly woman living a private life. They want to believe in an eternal Ginger. The real-world existence of Tina Louise in her current chapter is characterized by a quiet, grounded independence that stands in stark, beautiful contrast to the chaotic fabrications of online media. Far from being a hidden centenarian locked away in a secretive medical facility or a tragic, reclusive figure hiding from the world, she remains an active resident of Manhattan. For decades, she has chosen to navigate the bustling streets of her native New York City on her own terms, free from the theatricality of Hollywood publicity. This dedication to a normal, authentic daily routine is a testament to her personal resilience and her lifelong refusal to be entirely consumed by her most famous fictional alter ego. While the internet continues to churn out profitable myths about her health, she quietly goes about her days, embodying a form of survival that is deeply human. The true story of her longevity is not found in the sensationalized numbers cooked up by digital marketing algorithms, but in her steady ability to outlast the intense pressures of fame. Her life is a complex narrative of a woman who has watched her closest professional colleagues leave the stage one by one, leaving her to carry the mantle alone. To truly appreciate the woman who became the final survivor of the world's most famous fictional shipwreck, one must look far beneath the red hair and Hollywood glamour. Long before she ever stepped onto a Hollywood soundstage or put on the iconic, form-fitting gowns of Ginger Grant, her life was shaped by a deeply lonely and unstable childhood. The polished, sophisticated persona that she later projected to millions of television viewers was a carefully constructed shield, forged in response to early emotional hardship. The glamorous movie star who seemed to possess everything was, in reality, a product of a fractured New York upbringing that left deep, enduring emotional scars. Her journey to the island was not a straight path of privilege, but rather a complex survival narrative that began in the dark corners of an unstable home. By exploring her early years, we uncover a history that is rarely visible when watching the cheerful reruns of classic television. It is in this deeply human backstory, filled with absence and expectation, that the true strength of the final castaway becomes undeniably clear. The narrative of her early life begins in New York City during the height of the Great Depression, an era of widespread social and economic uncertainty. Born Tina Blacker, she entered a world where personal stability was a luxury that her young parents were simply unable to consistently provide. Her mother was a mere 18 years old at the time of Tina's birth, a teenager suddenly tasked with the monumental responsibility of raising a child in a chaotic environment. Her father, candy store owner Joseph Blacker, was older, but his advanced age did not automatically translate into emotional maturity or domestic tranquility for the young family. The inherent strains on the marriage quickly intensified, and by the time Tina reached the tender age of 4, her parents had divorced. In the 1930s, the dissolution of a marriage carried a heavy social stigma and often resulted in immediate financial and emotional destabilization for the children involved. For young Tina, the separation did not merely signify a change of home address. It permanently fractured her fundamental sense of safety and belonging in the world. The immediate aftermath of the divorce ushered in a period of profound displacement that would come to define the emotional landscape of her formative years. At the fragile age of just 6 years old, when most children are developing deep roots within a stable family unit, Tina was sent away to a boarding school. The institution was located in Ardsley, New York, a suburban area that felt a world away from the familiar, bustling streets of her early childhood. While boarding schools are frequently depicted in popular media as prestigious, structured environments that foster independence and elitism, for Tina, it felt like an explicit sentence of emotional exile. The atmosphere within the walls of the school was characterized by a pervasive emotional coldness and a rigid, unyielding social hierarchy among the students. The children sent there were not carefree youth enjoying the privileges of education. They were often deeply angry, displaced individuals struggling with their own abandonment. In this environment, survival required a hard exterior, and cliques formed with a terrifying speed that left the vulnerable completely exposed. The reality of life at the Ardsley boarding school was marked by a series of harsh social trials and institutional disciplines that deeply impacted her young psyche. Tina quickly learned that being alone in such a place automatically transformed a child into a primary target for psychological and physical bullying. She would later recall a deeply traumatic incident where she was explicitly instructed by older students to physically strike another young girl as an initiation. She never fully understood why she was selected for this cruel task, only that the entire experience left her feeling profoundly dirty, confused, and humiliated. The institutional punishments meted out by the staff left far stronger, more enduring impressions on her memory than any academic lessons taught in the classroom. As a disciplinary measure for minor infractions, she was frequently forced to stand entirely alone inside a pitch-black bathroom for extended periods. Staring into the deep shadows of that confined space, a paralyzing fear would settle deep into her chest, teaching her to associate isolation with terror. The physical dangers of the boarding school environment were mirrored by the enduring emotional neglect that characterized the weekly routine of the institution. On one particularly violent occasion, a fellow student aggressively stabbed Tina's wrist with a sharply pointed lead pencil during a brief confrontation. The physical wound eventually closed and healed over time, but it left behind a faint, permanent carbon scar embedded beneath her skin. This physical mark served as a lifelong, tangible reminder of an institution that was theoretically designed to educate and protect her, but had instead permitted her harm. What the young girl yearned for above all else during this period of intense isolation was a simple, consistent sign of parental reassurance. Sundays were designated as the official visiting days at the school, a weekly event that became the sole focus of her emotional existence. She would spend hours waiting by the entrance, her heart racing with anticipation, desperately hoping to see her parents drive up the road. Tragically, the visual confirmation she so desperately craved on those long Sundays was frequently denied to her, as her parents regularly failed to show up. She has openly articulated the profound, aching yearning for basic human affection, specifically the simple comfort of a warm parental hug that never came. While she lacked the adult vocabulary to fully comprehend the depth of her emotional deprivation at the time, she instinctively understood the rejection. It was not merely about missing physical closeness. It was about a total lack of confirmation that her existence mattered to the people who brought her into the world. The repeated disappointment taught her a devastating lesson. She could not rely on the presence or choices of others to validate her worth. In response to this chronic neglect, the young girl learned to deeply internalize her immense psychological pain and sense of worthlessness. She developed a profound, simmering anger that she felt entirely unable to express openly due to the rigid rules of her environment. This buried emotional turmoil remained quietly persistent throughout her adolescence and early adulthood, acting as a silent, invisible driving force behind her later ambitions. Decades later, having achieved international fame, she made the conscious decision to revisit these agonizing childhood memories in painful detail within her memoir, titled Sunday. When the deeply personal book was first published in the 1990s, it promised to reveal the vulnerable human being behind the glamorous Hollywood facade. However, the publication of her truth triggered a painful secondary conflict within her family structure that reopened old, unhealed psychological wounds. Her mother, who was still alive at the time of the book's release, publicly and aggressively rejected her daughter's written account of the past. The elderly woman insisted with fierce conviction that the descriptions of neglect and emotional coldness were entirely inaccurate fabrications of a dramatic imagination. This flat denial of her lived experience forced Tina to confront the reality of how differently a mother and daughter can remember the exact same years. The instability of her childhood did not conclude with her eventual departure from the strict confines of the Ardsley boarding school. At the age of 8, a sudden shift in custody arrangements allowed her to move into the home of her father and his newly wedded wife. This transition briefly offered a glimmer of hope, providing a temporary relief from the institutional coldness she had endured for years. For the first time in a long time, she was exposed to the concept of a domestic routine that resembled a traditional family structure. However, this newfound stability proved to be incredibly short-lived, dissolving rapidly as family dynamics shifted once again in the wake of adult conflict. By the time she reached the age of 11, she was abruptly uprooted and sent back to live with her biological mother. Her mother had recently remarried, entering into a relationship with a highly successful, wealthy medical doctor residing in the heart of Manhattan. This return to New York City introduced Tina to an entirely new, highly sophisticated world of material luxury and upper-class social expectations. The family's new Manhattan apartment was incredibly elegant, located in a prestigious neighborhood and furnished with the finest trappings of mid-century refinement. Her mother, highly ambitious and deeply focused on social climbing, envisioned a life of exquisite culture, fine finishing schools, and high society status for her daughter. She desperately wanted Tina to embody the ultimate ideal of Manhattan sophistication, pushing her toward a future defined by external appearance and social grace. Tina, however, despite the luxurious surroundings and expensive clothing, still carried the profound hollow ache of her early childhood displacement. She felt profoundly caught between two entirely incompatible worlds, one permanently shaped by emotional absence, and another heavily dictated by rigid social expectation. The elegant rooms of the Manhattan apartment could not easily erase the memory of the dark bathroom at boarding school. As she transitioned into a young adult and began the grueling process of building an acting career, she felt a powerful urge to confront her past. At the age of 22, possessing a growing sense of personal autonomy, she made a deliberate, independent effort to seek out her biological father. She recognized that the decades of silence and emotional distance between them would not simply dissolve overnight without a conscious intervention. The subsequent reunion was far from effortless, requiring both individuals to navigate a complex minefield of old resentments, unspoken apologies, and lost time. Yet the sheer willingness to initiate the contact mattered immensely to her development as a self-actualized woman. It represented her very first conscious adult step toward directly confronting her historical trauma rather than attempting to outrun it through professional success. This internal work of healing and reconciliation was a private journey that occurred entirely away from the cameras. This complex, painful personal history is almost entirely invisible to the millions of fans who routinely visualize her as Ginger Grant. When audiences think of the character, their minds immediately conjure images of effortless Hollywood glamour, unshakable poise, and absolute social confidence. They remember a fictional creation that was explicitly designed by network writers to sparkle, charm, and entertain without ever displaying a single moment of genuine vulnerability. They do not imagine the lonely, terrified little girl who spent her childhood counting down the grueling hours until Sunday afternoon, desperately praying for validation. The transition from that displaced child into the ultimate symbol of mid-century television glamour is a profound narrative of self-creation and survival. Tina Louise did not simply stumble into stardom. She consciously constructed a public persona that could withstand the scrutiny of the world. However, as she would soon discover, the very role that gave her a voice would also threaten to erase her true identity entirely. Part 2. By the time the fateful opportunity to audition for a new CBS comedy series arrived, Tina Louise was far from a desperate novice. She had spent years intensely studying her craft under the legendary instruction of Lee Strasberg at the prestigious Actors Studio in New York City. Her dedication to the rigorous methods of dramatic acting had already yielded significant professional dividends across the theatrical landscape. On Broadway, she had successfully captured the attention of critics and audiences alike with her vibrant performance in the hit musical production of Lil Abner. When the network executives initially reached out to her representation, she was actively performing on stage in Fade Out, Fade In alongside the comedic powerhouse Carol Burnett. Her cinematic work had also earned her substantial critical acclaim, most notably for her raw, powerful performance in the 1958 film drama God's Little Acre. That specific role had been deemed impressive enough to earn her a Golden Globe Award for Most Promising Newcomer, cementing her status as an actress of serious dramatic substance. Therefore, when television producers approached her with the concept of a character described as a mix of Lucille Ball and Marilyn Monroe, it sounded promising. The role of Ginger Grant, the beautiful movie star who finds herself stranded on a deserted tropical island, was framed as an exciting creative challenge. To a young, ambitious actress, the premise seemed like a unique opportunity to showcase both her sharp comedic timing and her undeniable physical glamour. A close personal friend and industry insider reportedly advised her to accept the contract, reassuring her that the pilot would likely fail or have a short run. This advice suggested that she could collect a steady television paycheck before quickly returning to her true artistic passion in the New York theater scene. Trusting this optimistic assessment of the show's longevity, she signed the contract and relocated to Los Angeles to begin filming the first season. However, once the daily grind of production officially commenced on the Hollywood soundstages, the underlying creative environment shifted in ways she found deeply distressing. As the scripts for the initial episodes began to accumulate, Louise quickly noticed that the writers were steering Ginger toward a one-dimensional caricature. Instead of the warm, multi-layered comedic figure she had been promised, the character was increasingly written with a sharp, flat sarcasm that lacked genuine charm. The humor felt incredibly thin to an actress trained in deep character analysis, and she grew intensely unsettled by the direction of the series. The realization that she might be trapped in a project that diminished her artistic capabilities drove her to a point of near total desperation. Refusing to quietly accept the situation, she took the bold and highly risky step of demanding an immediate meeting with the highest tier of network executives. During this tense confrontation, she expressed her profound doubts regarding the writing quality and explicitly threatened to walk away from the show entirely. It was an incredibly audacious move for a rising star, risking a permanent industry reputation of being difficult or uncooperative. The pivotal turning point for both the actress and the longevity of the series arrived when a significant shift occurred in the show's creative leadership. A new director was brought on board, and the writing staff was instructed to adjust their approach to the character of the movie star. Instead of forcing Louise into a narrow, unappealing mold, the scripts began to actively incorporate her personal comedic instincts and sophisticated wit. The dialogue was carefully recalibrated to strike a delicate balance between high-style Hollywood glamour and a self-aware winking humor that resonated with audiences. This creative adjustment allowed Ginger to become an authentic participant in the island's bizarre ecosystem, rather than a detached object of mockery. The natural ensemble chemistry among the 7 distinct cast members strengthened dramatically as a direct result of these narrative improvements. What had initially appeared to be a disposable, lowbrow television experiment began to develop a distinct, highly effective creative momentum. During its original 3-year broadcast run on network television, Gilligan's Island was not universally recognized as a groundbreaking cultural masterpiece by contemporary critics. It was frequently dismissed by highbrow reviewers of the era as a silly, unrealistic farce designed for mindless distraction. The true historical impact of the series only began to materialize long after the network officially canceled the show due to shifting demographic targets. It was through the secondary market of television syndication that the show transformed into an absolute titan of global popular culture. For decades, the 98 episodes were broadcast on a continuous daily loop on local stations across the United States and international markets. Multiple generations of children grew up returning home from school to find the castaways still desperately trying to escape the island. This relentless exposure ensured that the character of Ginger Grant became permanently embedded within the cultural lexicon of modern society. However, this unprecedented level of commercial success carried a heavy, deeply frustrating set of professional complications for the woman who brought Ginger to life. As the show's cultural footprint expanded, the television industry began the aggressive process of launching various spin-off projects, animated series, and high-profile reunion movies. When the call went out to assemble the original cast for these lucrative legacy projects, Tina Louise made the firm decision to decline participation. Her absence from these highly publicized reunions immediately fueled an intense wave of Hollywood rumors and tabloid speculation regarding her true feelings. Gossips loudly claimed that she harbored a deep, toxic resentment toward the show and openly despised the character that made her famous. Over the subsequent decades, she found herself repeatedly forced to clarify her complex position to a public that demanded simple narratives. She steadfastly maintained that she never hated playing Ginger Grant. Rather, she resented how the industry used that success to restrict her career. The core of her professional frustration lay in the rigid, unyielding mechanics of Hollywood typecasting, which effectively paralyzed her ability to secure diverse dramatic roles. Following the cancellation of the series, casting directors and network executives proved entirely unable to separate the actress from the glamorous castaway. When she walked into audition rooms, decision-makers saw only the red hair, the sparkling evening gown, and the comedic breathiness of Ginger Grant. The extensive, highly disciplined training she had received from Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio was completely ignored in favor of her commercial image. This professional confinement felt like a secondary form of exile, preventing her from exploring the full depth of her artistic capabilities. The very visibility that the show provided functioned as a golden cage, locking her into a permanent state of mid-century typecasting. She watched with a quiet sorrow as her peers in the dramatic arts were granted the freedom to evolve, while she remained frozen. Compounding this artistic frustration was a harsh financial reality that left a quiet, lingering bitterness beneath the surface of the show's enduring nostalgia. Despite the massive, multi-million-dollar profitability of the franchise through decades of global syndication, home video sales, and streaming licensing, the cast did not benefit financially. Under the standard network contracts of the mid-1960s, actors were only paid residual fees for a highly limited number of initial episode reruns. Once that contractual limit was officially reached, the ongoing financial windfalls generated by the series went entirely into the pockets of studio executives and creators. The island continued to generate astronomical amounts of passive revenue for decades, while the actors who made the characters iconic received absolutely nothing. This profound economic imbalance meant that the cast members were forced to continue working to support themselves, even as their faces remained ubiquitous on televisions. This economic disparity added a layer of systemic exploitation to the nostalgic affection that the public constantly directed toward them. In the decades that followed her departure from the soundstages of CBS, Louise fought tirelessly to build a diverse body of work beyond the island. She actively sought out challenging roles in a wide variety of cinematic genres, determined to demonstrate her range as a character actress. In 1975, she secured a memorable role in the critically acclaimed satirical horror thriller The Stepford Wives, playing a doomed, submissive housewife. She also transitioned back to television drama, delivering strong guest-starring performances in popular gritty crime series such as Kojak and the hit primetime soap opera Dallas. Her final official appearance on the silver screen came in the independent drama film Tapestry, a project she chose for its grounded emotional substance. Throughout this late-stage career push, she spoke candidly in press junkets about her deep desire to be recognized for the totality of her work. She pleaded with journalists to look past the tropical island and acknowledge the full, complex scope of her lifelong dedication to the craft. Despite these admirable, sustained professional efforts, the collective memory of the global viewing public remained firmly, immovably anchored to the shores of the uncharted island. No matter how many dramatic film roles she undertook or how many theatrical productions she graced, the ghost of Ginger Grant followed her. When people encountered her in public or wrote about her in entertainment columns, they invariably saw the iconic red hair and the stranded movie star. It was a profound creative duality that defined the entire trajectory of her adult life: gratitude for a role that ensured immortality, and frustration at its limits. The character of Ginger had secured her a permanent, undeniable place in the golden pages of television history, yet it had also obscured her humanity. Her decision to stay with the series during its initial writing crisis revealed a woman of immense professional determination and artistic self-preservation. In the end, she had chosen to fulfill her contract, and as a consequence, the island would never truly let her go. The passage of time is an uncompromising force, and as the decades accumulated, the vibrant circle of the original castaways began to inevitably narrow. Jim Backus, who had brought so much joy to millions as the elite Thurston Howell III, was the first of the primary cast to leave the stage. His death followed a lengthy public battle with the debilitating physical limitations of Parkinson's disease, casting a somber shadow over the fan community. Not long after, Alan Hale Jr., the beloved skipper who had spent years greeting fans with his signature captain's hat, passed away from cancer. His departure marked the loss of the show's emotional anchor, the man who embodied the protective, warm-hearted spirit of the entire comedic enterprise. These initial losses forced the remaining cast members to realize that they were transitioning from active actors into living historical artifacts. The public's relationship with the show began to transform, shifting from simple entertainment into a deeply sentimental form of historical preservation. The somber march of mortality continued its steady advance through the ranks of the legendary television family over the subsequent decades. Natalie Schafer, who had played the delightfully clueless and perpetually elegant Lovey Howell with such comedic perfection, passed away quietly at an advanced age. Bob Denver, the absolute heart, soul, and titular star of the entire franchise, left the world following severe complications from a major surgical procedure. His passing triggered a massive wave of global grief, as generations of viewers mourned the loss of the clumsy sailor who defined childhood television. Russell Johnson, the brilliant character actor who made the intellectual professor an indispensable part of the island's survival logic, followed his co-stars into history. Finally, the devastating loss of Dawn Wells in late 2020 sent shockwaves through the entertainment community, leaving fans to grapple with a stark new reality. The sweet, dependable Mary Ann was gone, and with her departure, an entire cultural era had officially reached its final, solitary chapter. By the arrival of the early 2020s, Tina Louise found herself standing entirely alone as the absolute final surviving member of the principal cast. This demographic reality carries an immense, often exhausting emotional weight that very few individuals in human history have ever had to navigate. To outlive every single one of your closest professional colleagues is to automatically transform into a living, breathing historical archive. She became the sole custodian of a collective memory, the only person left on Earth who knew what it felt like inside those soundstages. Whenever she interacted with the public or the media, she was inevitably barraged with endless questions about people who could no longer speak. She was forced to become a perpetual eulogist for her friends, constantly balancing her own private grief with the public's demand for nostalgic anecdotes. Her personal present was entirely consumed by the historical past of a television show that concluded its production over half a century ago. In June of 2025, a rare and deeply fascinating glimpse of the legendary actress occurred on the bustling streets of New York City's Upper East Side. A passing photographer captured images of her walking through her neighborhood, navigating the urban landscape with a quiet, unpretentious dignity. She was dressed in remarkably simple, practical attire: a pair of classic denim jeans, a functional dark jacket, and oversized sunglasses to shield her eyes. There was absolutely no Hollywood fanfare surrounding her movement, no entourage of publicists, and no desperate craving for the spotlight of attention. Yet despite the casual clothing and the passage of 91 years of life, her signature red hair remained completely, undeniably unmistakable to observers. She was not attending a high-profile industry gala or trying to revive a defunct career. She was simply living her life on her terms. The images presented a striking visual counter-narrative to the sensationalized, tragic depictions of aging stars that routinely saturate modern digital media. Throughout her later years, Louise has consistently expressed a deep, sincere gratitude for the extraordinary career opportunities that fame afforded her. However, she has coupled this appreciation with a steadfast, uncompromising refusal to let that single television role define her entire human existence. In an effort to channel her energy into meaningful real-world impact, she quietly joined a prominent literacy nonprofit organization based in New York. For years, she dedicated her personal time to working directly with underprivileged public school students, helping them develop essential reading skills. When the organization's corporate funding eventually disappeared due to economic shifts, she refused to abandon the children she had grown to love. She made the independent choice to continue visiting local classrooms on her own accord, reading stories to young children entirely away from cameras. This philanthropic chapter of her life rarely made the front pages of entertainment blogs, yet it reflects a deeply grounded, purposeful character. At 91 years old, she flatly refuses to present herself to the world as a fragile, dusty relic of Golden Age television history. Instead, she consciously chooses to project the image of a contemporary woman who remains actively engaged with the complexities of the present day. She has explicitly stated to interviewers that she believes in living firmly in the current moment, rather than dwelling endlessly on past triumphs. She openly acknowledges that she has not fully resolved or healed every single emotional scar from her difficult childhood or her complicated Hollywood career. Yet she possesses the rare emotional maturity to coexist with those unresolved historical narratives without letting them paralyze her current life. This balanced approach to aging is perhaps the truest, most authentic answer to the persistent public questions regarding how she lives today. She does not exist as a forgotten, tragic recluse hiding behind locked doors, nor does she chase the fleeting high of modern celebrity culture. The stark contrast between the sensationalized internet headlines and the quiet reality of her daily life offers a profound lesson in media literacy. The viral advertisements promised a shocking spectacle of extreme longevity, hidden medical secrets, and a dramatic, mysterious existence inside a hidden compound. But the actual human reality is far more quiet, grounded, and ultimately far more inspiring than any digital fabrication could ever hope to be. Tina Louise is a dignified nonagenarian who has personally witnessed the entire technological evolution of modern visual entertainment media. She has seen the industry transition from black and white broadcast television to the dawn of high-definition streaming platforms that introduced her work to children. She has survived massive industrial shifts, profound personal losses, and the systematic passing of every single colleague she shared that historic soundstage with. Her survival is not a mythic tale of eternal youth, but a real-world masterclass in human resilience, dignity, and autonomy. The true narrative of her current chapter is shaped by a beautiful commitment to personal freedom and the preservation of her private identity. Today, she does not actively chase the fleeting spotlight of modern publicity, nor does she stage carefully orchestrated career comebacks for media attention. Her most recent professional acting contribution occurred years ago, allowing her to step away from the industry's relentless demands without a sense of regret. Instead, she places an immense value on her personal autonomy, the simple, beautiful ability to walk down a New York street without an entourage. She cherishes the opportunity to read literature to young schoolchildren without the intrusive glare of television cameras documenting her charity for profit. She reflects on the sprawling trajectory of her long life with a rare, refreshing honesty, refusing to artificially rewrite her history for comfort. The truth of her life is far less sensational than the internet claims, but it possesses a deep, enduring human meaning. There remains something undeniably, profoundly sad about occupying the historical position of being the absolute last remaining castaway from the SS Minnow. It serves as a stark, uncompromising reminder to classic television fans worldwide of just how much time has continuously passed since that era. It forces the audience to confront the bittersweet reality that our collective cultural nostalgia is ultimately built upon fleeting moments that can never be repeated. Yet beneath the undeniable sadness of that lonely position, there's also an incredible, inspiring sense of human strength and personal endurance. She carries the massive historical legacy of that fictional island forward into the 21st century not through exaggerated internet claims, but through simple presence. The true story behind the sensationalized headlines is not about an actress miraculously reaching the age of 103 through some secret medical regimen. It is a story about a long life shaped by quiet resilience, a woman who continues to walk her city entirely on her own terms. Part 3. The phenomenon of the clickbait headline that targeted Tina Louise is a symptom of a much larger cultural obsession with the physical mortality of our aging cultural icons. In a digital landscape dominated by rapid-fire content consumption, classic Hollywood stars are often reduced to mere vessels for generational nostalgia. When the public interacts with these misleading advertisements, they are not genuinely seeking historical accuracy. They are seeking a temporary escape from the linear progression of time. The generation that grew up watching the castaways on television is now facing its own advanced aging process, making the survival of the cast a deeply personal matter. To see Tina Louise still walking the streets of New York is to receive confirmation that a piece of their own youth remains actively present in the world. This intense psychological projection creates an environment where the real-world experiences of the actress are constantly distorted by the emotional needs of her audience. The internet does not allow her to simply grow old in peace. It demands that her aging be transformed into a dramatic, click-worthy spectacle. This collective refusal to let the castaways grow old is deeply intertwined with the specific format of mid-century sitcom storytelling, which relied on permanent status quo preservation. Within the narrative architecture of the show, the characters were fundamentally trapped in a loop where escape was always teased but never permanently achieved. Every week, the professor would build an ingenious device, or a bizarre guest star would arrive, offering a glimmer of hope that was inevitably dashed by the episode's conclusion. This repetitive structure created a sense of comfort and predictability that became deeply comforting to millions of viewers over decades of daily syndication. Because the characters on screen were never allowed to change, evolve, or leave the island, the audience emotionally internalized the idea that the actors were similarly static. The sudden confrontation with the real-world deaths of the cast members shattered this comforting illusion, leaving Tina Louise to bear the full weight of the public's shattered fantasy. She became the ultimate anchor holding the entire illusion together, the last defense against the total erasure of the island from the physical world. The systemic financial exploitation that Louise and her co-stars experienced regarding their lack of residual payments is a critical element that shapes her relationship with her legacy. It is difficult for the modern television consumer to fully comprehend how a show that generated billions of dollars could leave its cast financially detached from its success. The actors were essentially treated as contract laborers rather than creative partners, their images commodified for the long-term benefit of corporate distribution networks. This economic reality adds a layer of genuine material frustration to the soft-focused nostalgia that fans constantly direct toward her. When people express envy for her glamorous life as Ginger Grant, they are completely ignoring the hard-nosed business mechanics that left her working long after the show concluded. Her subsequent career choices were not just about artistic expression, they were about financial survival in an industry that had already extracted maximum value from her youth. This economic perspective grounds her story in a realistic framework, stripping away the idealized Hollywood romance to reveal the labor behind the laughter. Her marriage to the prominent talk show host and media personality Les Crane, which concluded in divorce decades ago, represents another deeply personal chapter that she successfully insulated from the tabloid press. Together, they raised their daughter Caprice Crane, who would eventually build her own highly successful and respected career as an accomplished novelist and television writer. This familial relationship became a powerful, grounding force in Louise's life, providing a real-world sanctuary far removed from the superficiality of Hollywood red carpets. In raising her daughter to value intellect, creativity, and independence, she broke the cycle of instability and emotional coldness that had defined her own childhood boarding school experience. Her success as a mother is a quiet, unheralded achievement that stands in stark opposition to the tragic narratives of broken homes that plague classic celebrity biographies. Family did not become a tool for generating publicity or maintaining relevance in the entertainment columns, it remained a private space of genuine human connection. To analyze the career of Tina Louise is to examine the broader historical trajectory of how women were systematically packaged and marketed by the mid-century American entertainment apparatus. The industry sought to divide female talent into rigid, highly simplified categories: the wholesome girl next door or the hypersexualized, glamorous seductress. In casting Louise as Ginger Grant, the network explicitly attempted to capitalize on the global obsession with the archetype exemplified by Marilyn Monroe. However, unlike the tragic figures who were entirely consumed by their manufactured personas, Louise maintained a sharp, protective intellectual distance from her character. She viewed Ginger as a specific professional assignment, a comedic construction that required technique, timing, and discipline to execute effectively. This psychological separation is precisely what allowed her to survive the intense psychological pressures of global fame without succumbing to self-destruction. She did not mistake the applause directed at Ginger for a validation of her entire human worth. She kept her true self hidden safely away from the island. The enduring popularity of the debate between the characters of Ginger and Mary Ann is another cultural phenomenon that has continuously overshadowed the actual talent of the actresses involved. For over half a century, American popular culture has used these two distinct characters to create a simplistic binary choice regarding female appeal. Fans have spent decades debating whether the ideal woman is the sophisticated, unattainable movie star or the wholesome, accessible country girl. This perpetual cultural competition completely reduced both Tina Louise and Dawn Wells to mere archetypes, flattening their individual complexities as human beings and professional performers. In reality, the two women maintained a deeply professional, respectful relationship on set, working together to elevate the comedic timing of a male-dominated ensemble. The public's insistence on maintaining this fictional rivalry throughout their adult lives is a testament to how deeply the show's archetypes penetrated the collective psyche. Louise's survival as the last castaway finally brings a somber end to this artificial debate, leaving her to be viewed not in comparison to another, but as an individual survivor. Her sustained commitment to children's literacy in her later years provides a profound insight into how she consciously chose to redefine the concept of a star's legacy. When an actor achieves global fame for playing a highly superficial, glamorous character, the world rarely expects them to engage in hands-on, unpublicized community service. Yet Louise's decision to spend hours sitting in neglected New York classrooms reading to children was a direct response to her own childhood isolation. She understood on a profound level what it felt like to be a child waiting for someone to show up, looking for validation and attention that never arrived. By becoming the person who showed up for those students, she was actively healing the wounds of the little girl who stood alone in the dark boarding school bathroom. This work did not require the approval of casting directors, the validation of network executives, or the applause of a nostalgic television audience. It was a pure, autonomous expression of human empathy that allowed her to create a legacy of genuine utility far beyond the boundaries of Hollywood syndication. Physical reality of walking through New York City as a nonagenarian requires a level of personal fortitude that stands as a quiet defiance against the cult of youth. In a society that routinely marginalizes and renders invisible the elderly, particularly women who were once celebrated for their physical beauty, her unhurried presence is powerful. She does not alter her appearance to mimic the youthful visage of Ginger Grant, nor does she hide her aging body away from the gaze of the world. By walking her city in simple jeans and a dark jacket, she reclaims her physical humanity from the permanent commercial exploitation of the entertainment industry. She forces anyone who recognizes her to confront the reality of time, to see that the human being who carried the myth is a mortal woman who has earned every year of her life. This uncompromising authenticity is a radical act for a former Hollywood starlet, demonstrating that her self-worth was never entirely dependent on the preservation of a youthful illusion. As we look across the current landscape of classic television history, the solitary figure of Tina Louise reminds us that the actors who shaped our cultural imagination are rapidly departing the stage. The era of the mid-century network sitcom, which united millions of families around a single television set every week, has officially transitioned into a historical epic. The characters they created will continue to exist in the digital cloud, streamed by audiences who will never know the world that birthed them. But the living, breathing human beings who endured the grueling production schedules, the unfair contracts, and the intense typecasting are nearly gone. Tina Louise stands as the final sentinel of that specific creative world, a lone survivor who carries the memories of her fallen castmates within her own mind. Her continued presence is a gift to classic television history, offering a living bridge to a time when a show about seven stranded castaways could capture the heart of a nation. Ultimately, the true story of Tina Louise is not a sensationalized tale of extreme age, hidden secrets, or internet mystery. It is a profound narrative of human resilience. She has survived the trauma of an unstable childhood, the intense limitations of Hollywood typecasting, the systemic financial inequities of syndication, and the loss of her entire television family. She has emerged from these intense life experiences not as a broken monument to the past, but as a dignified, autonomous woman who continues to live on her own terms. The next time her name appears beside a viral headline designed to exploit our collective nostalgia, we must choose to reject the sensationalism and honor the reality. She is not a mythic figure frozen on a tropical island. She is a real woman who fought for her identity and won. Tina Louise is still here, still walking her city, carrying the permanent legacy of Ginger Grant while continuously standing as her own independent self.